when we're starting a new business, primarily like the most important thing is creating a profitable business model, right? If you don't have a profitable business model and you don't know how you're going to make money, you're not going to succeed because you're not going to make money and you're going to crash and burn. So that's always step one, knowing your numbers and then executing based off that. I mean, all the brand stuff and all that stuff is super fun, but you need to know your numbers.
Yeah, we'll golden, baby girl, we'll golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden. They're about to see us golden.
Ramsey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Been really excited about this one. I was thinking about this all throughout the week, but I remember, so I used to work in Port Melbourne, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and I would come from out of town. So every day I'd drive past Port Melbourne F45, and it'd just be absolutely pumping.
Yeah.
And I just remember obviously following you from back in the day and almost watching from afar kind of that evolution. I think I come right around, right in the middle, and then obviously following you, and I've always been a big lover of business, the nuances of it, the journey you go on, but also how you can the competitive side of it, right? Where you can be so different to other people and obviously build winning products. So really excited about it. But I think what we'll start with, man, is obviously getting a bit of insight into yourself. I'll let you give yourself a bit of an intro and then we can dive into, the journey that you went on with F45 and obviously a lot of the other businesses that you've then gone on to create and innovate with.
Sure. Well, I think probably for relevance, my career as such started with the F45 days. I had been a PT when I was younger. Probably didn't like it as much as I thought I would. I got qualified very young, like 18. Started taking group classes, started taking one-on-ones, and I just felt like a psychologist. So I ended up exiting the fitness industry really early. Went to uni, did a Bachelor of Marketing, Masters of Commerce. Started working in a nightclub on the weekends and met my business partner, Mark. And he actually approached me with this concept called F45. At the time, there was probably 3 or 4 studios open in Australia. You look at it now, there's 2,500, 3,000, something like that. And so having like the marketing background and being a PT, he said to me, I think you're the perfect, business partner. I think this is going to do really well. So we jumped on a plane to Bondi, checked out the studio. I walked in. It was the most amazing experience, like DJ going off, class full of 27 people. There was another 27 people lined up, ready to go in. I just remember the vibe and having been in that stale kind of fitness industry environment when I was younger, and I came to Bondi, I saw that, I was like, wow, this has to be the next progression of how things are going, right? So we secured two licenses, as you said, Port Melbourne before. That was a beast. That actually won best studio in the world 3 years running. We used to take classes of 72 people with 5 trainers. Everyone had their assigned roles. It was just a madhouse. Our Christmas parties, we'd have like 1,000 people there, just everyone just having a good time. That community was amazing, but yeah, we launched that. We launched South Yarra, and what we just did was kept reinvesting in more studios. So then we got Ascot Vale, we got Geelong. We got 2 studios in Darwin, and that was a bit of a marketing decision as well. What we'd seen was the territory in Darwin, we literally had probably 120,000 people there within our sort of catchment, whereas the other sort of F45 licenses, you'd get like 20,000, 30,000. I mean, there's one on every fucking corner at the moment. But yeah, so we just kept reinvesting, got to 6 studios. At the same time, I started a retreats company called Journey Retreats, just purely to sort of leverage the database that we already had and the members we already had and give them something a little bit different. And then we sold everything to Start Strong and to sort of transition from that franchisee phase to a franchisor, which was, I think, always the end goal. Bit of shock. I think there was a bit of shock value when we left the network, the F45 network. We'd won Best Studio. We'd been up there, at the Ivy, accepting the awards, teaching everyone how we'd done it, how we, this was all based off revenue. But then when we left, it was equally as sort of, shocking. But I'm so glad that we did that. Now we're here today with Strong, and we have 11 studios open. We have, I think, 74 now sold, and we're just rolling out.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of, I guess, key differences that you see, or that, obviously going from the franchisee to the franchisor, initially that you kind of go, obviously it's at a larger scale, and I'm guessing that there's a lot more. You would have to started during our 45 days. You would have been obviously started as a technician, and then obviously, brought your belief system into that, and obviously, scaled it up to, locations, and now you're obviously having to kind of go on the other side and then do the same thing, but then obviously, try to manage that belief system across, what's going to be, 70 locations now. So what are the key differences that you've seen from taking that leap?
It's like, it's a huge difference. You're effectively now providing the workouts, the everything. There's so many business units within a franchise. There's, you're selling merch, you're selling education, you're providing workouts, you're providing like everything. Where I think the cohesion is, and this is where I think we have an advantage over a lot of other franchisors, is we've been through the process as a franchisee. So we know the pain points. We know the headaches that come with having a head office that have compliance and have even like the guidance, with the franchise onboarding. We didn't get a really great onboarding experience. We were kind of left to our own devices with F45. We were number 10 in the world, and that's fine. That was still growing and whatever else. But we've ensured that the onboarding process is huge. So everything they learn, from operations to sales to marketing to to employment, to finding the right instructors, to how to even deal with customers, and everything is just so in depth. And it's such a large process, but that's like, we're just giving them the tools to be successful, right? So I guess there's a huge difference, but coming from being a franchisee has just helped so much. It's been brilliant.
Just with knowing what to provide, and obviously going through the process and knowing what actually makes a successful franchise as well.
Exactly right.
So one of the questions that I would have for you, if I was to sit, and I'm going to treat it like this, I'm going to treat it like I'm sitting, in like a mentoring session with you, right? Or sitting across the table, and I just want to pick your brain. But back in those days, what made your F45 so successful? What was the differentiating factor?
So I think that probably the number one success factor for any gym is community. So building community. Instead of heroing your influencers and your whatever else, it's more about your local area marketing. So your baristas, your hairdressers, your local business owners, they're the people who are going to bring people to your studio. Most people train within an 11-minute drive of their gym. You look at referral processes. Let's say you've got a gym with 150 members. In the boutique space, we try and work on about 300 members. If 150 members bring one person each, you're full. You're literally full. So the referral process for us was super important. We really leveraged our own existing community and built through that. And then I guess we did really leverage early days. We had a couple of footballers come on. We had to build brand equity, which never existed in Melbourne. So we had to really push the PR side of things. It's not an area that I really enjoy that much, but it's something that it's almost like a necessary evil that you kind of have to do.
It's kind of like, it allows you to go a little bit quicker, right?
Yeah. And it's so interesting. Like it does work to some extent. And like a good example of that is this massive article came out in Brisbane about Strong and the growth of Strong and the growth of Strong in Queensland. And we converted like 5 or 6 franchises off the back of this one article that was in mainstream media, like, sort of their equivalent of Herald Sun, which I hadn't really rated I know PR has its place and everything like that, but I hadn't seen the effects until that article came out, and it was read by over 1 million people apparently, and so I guess now I'm giving it a little bit more cred, but back in those days it was I don't know, it was just let's just get as much PR, get as much as we can, and then once we build a community, let's just focus on that community. A few other things like, having a marketing background, I kind of built the digital formula that we used for lead generation via Facebook and all that sort of thing. So that was really cool, just running ads and getting the targeting right, and getting those processes right, and even just running the Instagram correctly. We're the most followers on Instagram in the F45 network, whereas no one really paid that much attention. This started 7 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, that would have been prime Facebook ad days, when it was, it would have been kind of quite new, but still, I felt like it's dropped off a little bit now, but that would have been prime time.
Yeah,
kind of back in those days.
Yeah, that was it. And so, we went real hard on that perspective as well. So, it all helped. Everything helps, but I don't think there's any one facet. It's always made up of, let's do 5% here, 5% here, 5% here, and then eventually it all works together and you nail it.
Yeah. So one of you mentioned brand equity before, and I feel like that's only a concept that business people actually use in a sense and truly understand. Do you want to explain a little bit about what brand equity is, and also the process that you look at, the process you go through in order to build that as quick as possible? Because I would assume when you're starting a franchise, you can't go slow. Yeah. Or even being a franchisor now, you can't go slow. You kind of have to learn how to build that pretty quickly.
Yeah, probably the most basic way to explain it is it's the value of your brand, right, within the market. So someone like McDonald's right now would have huge amounts of brand equity, and they've managed to build that up over years and years and years, and then obviously there's financial equity that comes with that. So I think, what we're trying to achieve with Strong, again, is pushing the PR angle, just getting ourselves out there, and we're lucky we have a very unique brand, which took a long time to sort of put together through the whole brand discovery process. And now that we have it and we have our sort of value proposition, we can go super hard. Now that we know our systems, we know who we are, that's when you can start building brand equity. But there's been companies that have done it in the past that just kind of start something and don't really know who they are or what they're doing, and it's worked. It's been really interesting to look at a few other people, how it's happened. I don't think these days things go viral really anymore, whereas I think that, let's say 5 to 7 years ago, things just naturally would go viral, even 10 years ago. So now there has to be a much greater thought process behind that. But yeah, it's a combination of absolutely everything. Even being here on a podcast with you today, I would consider a facet of building brand equity. I don't know, would you agree?
100%. I think it's anything that, brand equity is trust, really. It's how much does the market trust your brand? Like Tesla. Tesla's one of those companies I look at and go, they've spent $0 in advertising, literally in their entirety in business. And it's kind of brand equity is that measure, and it is quite hard to measure, to actually quantify, if you're not talking in revenue standpoint, but it is something that you can build a lot quicker, you can build slow, no matter what, takes years, and there's always another level to go to with it. But I think it does come, I think a lot of it does come from network as well. I would use us as an example, trying to bring, and we think of it like this, right? We've put a lot of thought into it, but it's if you're bringing, as a podcast, when you start off, it's kind of really hard to get guests on, and it's really hard to go out and obviously grow the thing, but you've got to start to think about, okay, well, what are the steps that we need to take? And one of the things we did was go quality. We're going to go, we think that can be a big differentiating factor as this becomes more competitive. And that's how we can start to maybe just get some little wins. And then over time, obviously, as you, and again, a studio, because we want, like, exactly how, when you walked in, you're like, oh, this is a really cool space. Like, we go, well, it's not just something that we want to do for our listeners. We actually want our guests to have a really great experience as well. And we have future plans for that as well, and kind of continuation there. But we look at that very much through the same lens of how can we start to build brand equity and differentiate, but make, we want to be trusted in the market, and we want to start to obviously differentiate, from others, and we feel like that's how we can do it. So
it's the hardest part, right? Like starting, and this is why startups are so hard. It's like when you have zero awareness within the market, but it should get, as you build brand equity, it should get easier and easier and easier and easier. And I think it not only exists from a consumer standpoint, so say, for instance, podcasts with your listeners, but also when people within the industry, suppliers, whatever else, also gives you credibility, like other podcasts are then asking you. And like, I just think it exists not only from a consumer standpoint, but, B2B as well. But yeah, it should just naturally get easier as it grows. But how many times do people like grow killer brands? Like, it's really, like, it's tough. It's tough work, hey?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think there's levels to it, right? Like, and that's kind of like business in a nutshell. It's like you have a massive win one day, and then the next day it's like, you celebrate the win, and that might be landing a guest for us, or for you, it might be, bringing on, franchisees and so on. And that comes from the brand equity, and that's like the kind of end result of it. But then it's like, okay, well, and I'm sure for you, it's like, well, how do we break into international markets? And then all of a sudden that requires another level of brand equity. And it's the same for us. It's kind of like we're thinking about it now, and we're like, okay, what's the next step for us? And we had some big wins in the last month of just signing sponsors. And
huge.
Yeah, huge. Yeah. And we've had sponsors reach out regularly, but it's about the right sponsor. What's the one that elevates our brand and allows us to create more brand equity? Not just, because there's revenue, and that's really important, and that's really hard. In our position, we've been 8 months, haven't made a single cent, but, how can we make a decision? We need to make sure we make the right decision, because that will, again, accelerate the growth of our brand equity, which allows us to then compound everything that we're doing. So definitely.
That's very noble as well, the fact that you're picking and choosing, because a lot, you see it happen all the time. People align with certain brands and stuff like that, and it's purely financial. It's a financial gain position, and it just doesn't work. So I like it. Yeah.
And because you guys would have had to do something similar, across all your different businesses. Because one thing I noticed about was what you've done in all of your businesses is obviously make really good partnerships, and be able to network really well. And with the right people, to create the certain perception that you're looking for your brand.
Collaboration's massive, and it's one thing that, like, it's one of our, say, brand pillars. But just being with the right people. Like, for instance, I've just started working with a company called Single Use Ain't Sexy, and all they do is they provide hand pumps and with tablet form soap, and it's just refills, and so it means you're not continually replacing dispensers. We're like strictly no single-use plastics in the studios, so no Mount Franklin bottles. There was a studio over the weekend that had balloons in there. I fucking cracked it. But like no single-use plastics. And it's something that's really important to us, and just aligning with the right people just makes it so much easier. It gets the message across, and it's like, it's not something that you really want to promote that hard, but when you're with the right people, great. The protein brands that we work with, the athletes that we work with, whatever it is, it's really, everything is quite in depth when we think about it as a team, who we want to be, who we want to work with. It's a pretty in-depth process.
So I was going to say, when you're going out to build a brand, do you use like the brand identity framework and kind of branch out from there? Do you have your own kind of way that you look at it, and something that you kind of go, okay, because in terms, it could be like pillars, or it could be brand as personality, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through that whole process. It started I've never actually talked about this, but it started with we're working with an agency, and we're just trying to discover who we were, how we spoke, like get your tone of voice, and it was like, all right, who do you want to be? And we had to like literally name people who we wanted to be like, and I think Serena Williams was in there. Who else was in there? Ramsey was in there, Chris Hemsworth. Natalie Emmanuel, she's like, do you watch Game of Thrones?
Yeah. Oh, I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's like Khaleesi's like right-hand girl. She's got the curly hair.
Yeah.
So we were looking at her Instagram. She's like really opinionated, really cool. And like we're big on our environmental stuff. She was big on her sort of Black Lives Matter stuff, but she's just like super cool. And we just got these like random sort of group of people. Daniel Ricciardo was in there. And we just sort of created sort of the steps of building the brand through like these muses. And I just found it so intriguing. And it took so long, like even like, and then getting your color tones and everything like that. Like you would notice with Strong, we're completely gender neutral in the way we display ourselves. Pilates is predominantly female and always has been. So we really want to go for guys. It's actually very, very easy to get females in. They're early adopters. They pick things up so quickly. It's easy for a studio to be 90% female. Like, I don't know why. Maybe men are just stuck in their ways or whatever else. So, you know, building out the color tones and making Strong look strong. We're black and white. We're a splash of light blue just to sort of break things up a little bit. But yeah, very, very interesting process. But yeah, we have our pillars. We have our, you know, our tone of voice. We have all that sort of stuff. I guess it becomes, I haven't even looked at that documentation for probably 2 years now. Like it just becomes, I guess, a part of you, and then you just know how you talk and feel and display yourself eventually. So yeah.
I think you always know what you want, right? But those kind of activities, you're like, it's more about process of elimination and understanding what you don't want, right? It's like, well, we don't want to be like this person, but we kind of want to be like this person. What are those characteristics and traits? And you already know that inside. But it's more like, how can we need to label it, right? And then once you label it, especially, I mean, as a founder, you know, you're the most passionate person about what you're doing, and then you want to start to be able to share that with employees and staff and management and all those kind of things, and it's really important to obviously understand that so that it's easy to convey at a certain point as well.
Yeah, definitely. You want everyone drinking the Kool-Aid. Like you want everyone sort of, everyone who's, you know, everyone's bought in, you know. And like to be transparent, it's probably a lot easier for us at the moment to employ people. It's right now we're the cool kids and people want to work with us. So, you know, we can go to a new state and automatically we have, you know, a dozen people who will go through our Strong Academy, who will come across from other Pilates studios or other gyms even, and will want to work for Strong and be an instructor for Strong. And it's like that brand equity piece we talked about, that, you know, the more the brand grows and the cooler we are, and it's easier to get people on board. But like that was so hard. The first 6 months was just terrible, and then COVID hit, so that was even more fucked.
Yeah. Like, definitely. Like, and I mean, that's a startup, right? Like the first 6 months is always extremely painful. I feel like deep down as a founder, you kind of like, you do enjoy that though, like, you know, because you obviously like building things. So the other thing I wanted to touch on, which we mentioned before, was community. Because obviously that's been a massive part of what you've done across all of your businesses over the last 7 years. What are some of the kind of key things that you've done with all your businesses that you think has allowed you to galvanize a community and actually get people really invested in obviously the brands and the experiences that your businesses produce?
It's a number one question, right? How do you build community? And honestly, I think it's about being available, being on show, being there, and also just being a good human. I know there should be metrics behind how to build community, but if you're there literally communicating daily with members, and then like just literally getting amongst that community, whether it's the Port Melbourne community or the South Yarra community or whatever it is, working with the cafes, working with the local, your local heroes as such. And then like you just top it off with some really fun parties and get everyone together and just being really supportive. Like I remember any time that we would have a member that was, you know, aligned with the charity or something like that, we would put on a fundraiser with them and try and help them to increase revenue for that charity or whatever else. Yeah, it's not. I don't think there's any real secret just being a fucking good person, like, and caring about sort of the community you're in. Yeah, it's hard to quantify.
Yeah. So, do you think like then it's more about, because like you know you're one person, right? And I feel like finding the right people to bring into your business as well, like those kind of people that are willing to kind of go out into the community. They're willing to, you know, they're kind of the bubbly person who will engage with, you know, customers when they're coming in and just, you know, be, you know, like mates in a sense. But the question is like, do you think it comes down to finding the right people? Because I'm sure you're experiencing that on a mass scale right now with Strong and going, you know, previously you still had to do it, but it's a bit more of on a minor scale to what you're doing right now with Strong. Yeah,
100. Like people is everything. Like I've been so blessed to have the most amazing staff, and what's really cool is like all through those F45 days, all of our like gun studio managers and everything like that, they all own their own businesses now, or they've progressed, or they're now working for Strong. But yeah, 100%. So you're vetting those people. There's a massive culture fit required, and I've only just started to really be quite strict on this within Strong. Is, you know, the person that we're hiring can have all the skill set in the world. They can be one of the smartest humans, but if it's not a culture fit, like we can't hire them. And we've seen it a few times now not work because of that. So yeah, it's massively. But like we're effectively now just like, instead of hiring studio managers, we're now bringing on franchisees, and we're screening franchisees, and we have the best group of like young entrepreneurs that are owning these studios. And like we'll do probably like an end of year trip maybe to Thailand or to Northern Queensland, and you know we'll get some like really cool educational pieces, and we'll have a lot of drinks and we'll have a good time. We'll get everyone together, and like I'm really excited about that. But there's not one person in our network that call it is like a bad egg. Do you know what I mean? They're all just incredible.
What kind of process goes into that then? Because I mean, it's very easy for us to sit here and say, find the right people, you know, and the rest of it will be history. But like, what kind of processes go into that, you know, even now with what you're doing with Strong? Like
the B2B sales process?
Yeah, just more like finding people, right? Yeah. So, you know, like you obviously said that you're getting quite strict with it. So what does that actually look like?
I work a lot off referral now, and almost headhunting now. So when we're looking at key positions for Strong, we're headhunting. And the fitness industry, although it's large, it's quite small in Australia. So you know someone's background very, like just from a few phone calls.
Yeah.
So that would be, in terms of staff, that's probably the route that we're taking. But in terms of like franchisees, I mean, there's a huge sales process. My business partner Mark looks after that. And you know, we're running Facebook ads, where, you know, we're doing PR, as I said before. We've got all sorts of ways to bring people into our, call it a sales funnel. But at the end of the day, if the person's not appropriate, then we don't bring them on. And it's weird, because you'd think that you just want to sell franchises, sell, but it's not like that with us at all. We've just recently like given money back to people and told them to just, this isn't right for you, it's not going to work. Just from like, you know, dealing with them for a month or two. But yeah, it's nice to be selective and not just accept anyone to come in.
It's the brand equity thing again, right? It's like, you know, all it takes is a few franchises to go sour or not to go right, or, you know, maybe they're not you know, stepping up to the kind of level that you want them to be. And
naturally with any franchise, you're going to have high performers and you're going to have low performers, but as long as the low performers are willing to identify why they're low performing, and they're willing to work on why they're low performing, and they're willing to accept feedback and then implement change, That's super important. But if you get someone who's performing low and they refuse to take on advice, it's a disaster for Recipe. And like, we have a buyback clause that in case something like that happens, we can, you know, look to do that. And I don't think we ever will have to do that. But yeah, as I said, so far so good. Great little community.
Yeah, and you kind of want that you want that, I guess, the difference between your best and your, I don't want to say worst, but your lowest performers to be small, right? Like, because I feel like that's when, as a kind of cohesive group, you're obviously going to be the most powerful.
Yep, and it is so far, like, it's going relatively well in terms of like the gap not being so big, and then we've already started putting time into like some of the low performing studios, and mind you, the low performing aren't that bad. But just if you scale it to what everyone else is doing, and we've already seen straight away, like, bang, all of a sudden, like, extra $3,000, extra $4,000 revenue a week just by like them implementing the systems that we're giving them. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, amazing. All right, so the you've been able to grow, three, probably more, but the three businesses that I know of to a really, really high level. And as I said, the thing I'm most excited about it today is I want to understand your philosophies on business and how you look at it, because you've been able to do it, and not just do it once, but over and over again. And I obviously listened and did a lot of research, before today. And something I heard you talk about, which I heard you talk about in multiple podcasts, was the business life cycle and continuous innovation. So this is almost like a two-part question, but it'll provide some good conversation. How do you look at business? Like, if you were to walk into another business today, how do you think about it, from everything from understanding what a good opportunity looks like to then obviously getting the ball rolling, and then what's that framework that kind of comes in and you go, yep, this is what we need to do from a principle standpoint? It obviously differs between whatever product or business you're kind of doing. And then secondly, do you want to talk a little bit about the business life cycle and obviously the innovation piece that you do talk about? Yeah.
So primarily when starting a new venture, is that what you mean, walking into a business? Yeah. Because I walk into businesses all the time, and I'm like, and this is one thing that you kind of learn, like you kind of do automatically. You wonder like how much rent they're paying and you do like the sums and how successful is this business. It's something that's like now ingrained. It's so hard not to try and be analytical about everything.
Yeah.
But when we're starting a new business, primarily like the most important thing is creating a profitable business model, right? If you don't have a profitable business model and you don't know how you're going to make money, you're not going to succeed, because you're not going to make money and you're going to crash and burn. So that's always step one, knowing your numbers and then executing based off that. I mean, all the brand stuff and all that stuff is super fun, but you need to know your numbers. Would you agree?
100%, yeah. So I'm wondering, do you kind of use the gross profit model? So one thing I've always been taught is like gross profit is obviously what it costs to reproduce the product. So if you're selling, within Strong, you're selling time. With a T-shirt, it's whatever it takes to obviously create another T-shirt, or the cost to produce, in a sense, is like the base layer of that. I don't know. Maybe I'm.
Yeah. There's. I mean, to some extent, it's not, that area is not as in depth as you think. It's just ensuring things are profitable. We know what a franchise will get on the market if it sells to private equity at X amount of studios and it's making this much revenue. In terms of setting up our, like, selling merch, all that sort of thing, yes, everything needs to be profitable. Each department needs to be profitable. So yeah, I mean, one thing we probably don't measure, and it's interesting that you say that, is the time that goes into it. Right now, although time is very scarce, we are spending too much time on absolutely everything and trying to refine everything, and everyone's working super hard, and sometimes it's just bullshit, but like you have to do it, I think, as a startup. So we're not really monetizing time as such. The innovation piece is something that, like, I think it's probably been one of the main drivers as to why the things that myself and my business partner have done have been successful. Like, you need to innovate. You have to. If you don't innovate, you will recess and you will die. whether that's every 3 years, whether that's every year, whether that's every 6 months, product life cycle or business life cycle, you intro, you get to your peak, and if you don't innovate, you will recess, and you will continue to recess, and you will die. So basically with the innovation curve, you keep recessing and you continue your business on that growth, on that upward trajectory, right? So with Strong, like it's been like two and a half years, say, since we started. It is a completely different service offering to how we started it. If I'm highly critical of absolutely everything, we are putting money into tech, we're putting money into the customer experience, we're putting money into absolutely everything that we shouldn't be, instead of just sitting there and running with a product, because I don't think there's ever a finished product, right? You look at a lot of the big brands always rebrand in they'll change their logo, or they'll do this, or they'll change their menu or whatever, and it always happens. Like you see it time in, time out. Think about that on like a 10x scale. We're trying to just constantly be ahead, and the fitness industry moves so quickly. And we've seen in my short 7 years that I've been in this, I've seen brands come in and fail within like a 2-3 year period. There's some have come from the US that haven't identified that Australia does not like US products. There's a big reason Starbucks failed in Australia, for instance. It's a very famous case study. I've seen brands come and go in this space in only the 7 years I've been involved. So it's like super important, everything. My role is just innovating right now. And trying not to be an asshole in the process. Yeah,
that's the hardest part, I reckon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I battle with as well. I mean, especially being in a startup, you're super passionate about it, and it's difficult, And when things are difficult, sometimes it's hard to obviously keep your nerve and these kind of things as well. But coming back to innovation, then, like, how do you look at an opportunity, or how do you innovate? Do you do you look at trends, and do you try to, do you use data, but do you use people that you might talk to? Are you kind of quite nuanced in the way that you listen to conversations? Like, is there a certain way that you view innovation and then a process that you take it through to actually bring something like that to life?
Yeah, we sort of, a lot of it is, and being self-funded, we've got limited money in what we can spend. Like, if we had a lot more money, we would probably have our own app that integrates with an Apple Watch that goes on the TVs, and building out this super tech. A lot of it is based off what we can afford to do. We try not to be reactive. So I get super jealous looking at competitors if they do something before we do it. So just keeping an open mind to things, and I get ideas from everything. Not even necessarily fitness industry. I try not to look too much at it, but what other brands are doing, and tech's a massive one. But it's very limited to how much capital you have as well. Be nice to just have an unlimited budget, and then I could just innovate like hell, but it doesn't work like that.
It kills you, doesn't it?
Yeah. But no, I'm actually really driven by competition. Like, I want to be the best, and I've always wanted us to be the best, whether it's, our own F45s against other F45s, or our retreats business against competitive retreats business. Whatever it is, I just want us to be the best. So, people, there's always, you get a lot of entrepreneurial speakers that talk about just focus on yourself and whatever else. I actually I don't mind being challenged by other competitors. I think it's healthy, and I like trying to be better. Yeah,
I think there's a necessity. I mean,
yeah,
you don't play sport, you get taught as a kid you play to compete, right? And just because competition exists doesn't mean that everything is about winning, but a big part of why you compete is to win, and everybody should try to compete, in my opinion. Whether you're playing sport, whether you're starting a business, when you're doing these things, it's natural to want to compete and want to be good at something, and I think that's I think that's something that doesn't mean I treat you any different. It doesn't mean I go away from my values and my morals and do things that are that'll cost me integrity and these kind of things. But if I get challenged, I'm not gonna walk away, and we're gonna kind of duel.
It's
bit.
healthy. It's healthy. It pushes you to be better. It does. Like,
where innovation comes from.
Yeah. Like if someone puts up a certain piece of content and I'm like, wow, that company did this amazing piece of content. I'm like, fuck, why didn't we do that? Why didn't we think of that? And then it's like, all right, how are we going to be better? Like, it's just, I love it. Like, I don't think anyone doesn't strive to be the best in their field, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be all wholesome and just like, focus on what you're doing. It's nice to just be the best and try and be the best, I reckon.
100%.
Anyway,
100%. I agree. I think, competition is healthy because it makes us all better.
Yep.
Like if you think about anyone that the world looks up to, Kobe, LeBron, the best athletes in the world, Nike have built a brand around. These guys would crush you if you tried to come near them. Like that's just how it is. And that's why they're the best in the world. So I think at some level it's healthy. And I think the only thing that would be unhealthy about it is if you are going outside of yourself in terms of your morals and you're kind of doing shifty stuff and kind of and these kind of things. But if purely wanting to actually be the best, you don't have to say sorry for it.
Yeah, and people do sell their souls to the devil. Like it, yeah. Oh, yeah. But I completely agree with that. You don't want to question your own morals and yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
So one of the things that I loved. There's a podcast you did, but you talked about the scent that you use in Strong and how there was so much nuanced thought that went into it around the customer experience. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about that, because I feel like this is marketing 101, right? This is the customer experience. This is And I said a little comment to you before, like you could go to a restaurant and if the restaurant smelled like sewerage but the food was really nice, it still wouldn't be one of the top restaurants in the town, let's say. Yep. So do you want to talk about, say, maybe some of the things that people might not pay attention to that you guys do, and kind of how that relates to maybe the success of your business?
Yeah, I think like we call them the 1%ers pretty much. So it's the little things that customers notice, but they're not. It's by no means a necessity for the business to operate, right? So the scent is a big one. I can't remember what year it was, but that got voted number one reason females left gyms was due to cleanliness, right? So when we were developing our scent, so every studio smells exactly the same. We put saffron in there, which kind of smells like a chlorine, which is like a clean scent. And then we put tones in there that uplift people, so when they walk in, they feel uplifted and powerful. And that was, again, I worked with a perfumologist, and we created that over it would have been 3-4 month process, and literally sitting out on a table with 50 fucking different scents and smelling all of them and saying that works, put these together, and that took like ages. And we came up with this scent, and it's so cool. I should have brought your sample, actually. It smells amazing. So that's one thing. Like all the lockers at Strong have phone chargers, right? Because we don't want people bringing their phones into the studio taking selfies while they're training, getting results. So all the lockers have phone chargers. There's at the end of the workout, there's a cold towel that's been soaked in eucalyptus oil that they get. It's been in the fridge. Again, like not a necessity, but just like that relief when you've just had this really tough workout. You've probably burnt 700 calories. Your face is red, and you just get this cold towel, and it opens up your airways, and it's just like, yeah, it's just these little kind of things that we've included in the customer experience that is probably like really helping us. And it's just stuff that we identified, like even before we started F45, me and Mark went around to like 100, literally went to 100 different studios. We're like, geez, those lockers were dirty, and that trainer was just so like, they were on their phone the whole time, and we just like literally picked everything apart. How can we do this better? What areas can we create? Can we create areas where people are actually building community and talking, and that's that's another big thing, getting people to actually interact with each other and be comfortable with each other, and there's so much to it. The lighting, the music, the everything. It's all very intricate. Nothing you see is by chance. Like it's all. There's been so much going into it.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. That's amazing depth, first of all. But I think it's amazing what can happen when you do focus on those. Like,
yep.
And especially, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. But like, I feel like if someone comes to me with a business idea and they're like, "Oh, what do you think of this?" Like the first thing I'll say is go away and actually do your research and actually find out, okay, has it been done before? Who does it well? And actually go put some effort into that. And I feel like that's often a step that just gets massively overlooked when it comes to starting a business. Like people have an idea. I think one of my mates called me up yesterday. Do you know Tim Hanley?
Yeah.
So Timmy gave me a call. He's hilarious, but he goes, mate, do you know an app developer? And I go, yeah, brother. Like, I'm like,
I'm just imagining his face when he's saying
oh
this.
yeah, 100%. 100%.
So
you could imagine, right?
Yeah.
He goes, hey man, do you know an app developer? And I'm like, yeah. Like, what do you need? And he's like, I got this idea, man, $1 billion idea. And I'm like, all right, sweet. He goes, so I just got back from a holiday and I was at the park. There's heaps of dogs running around. He's like, I'd love to look after these guys. And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, so you dog sitting? And he's like, yeah, man. I'm like, being done. I'm like, go do your research. Being done. He's like, fuck. But like, that.
Man, do you know how much money some of these pet resorts make and the dog walkers? And it's insane. We put our 2 Frenchies up in when we were in Queensland. We put them up in this like high-end resort. It cost me like $2,000 for a week.
Yeah.
But they got walks, they got washed, they got,
People will do anything for their pets.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? And it's like, I feel like that's an industry. There's just so much money to be made in there.
Mate,
the
margins are massive.
Yeah.
The scraps they get from butchers that they sell for like, $10 a unit. It's just crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, 100%. I would do anything for my dog. So,
but yeah, 100. What have you got?
A Moodle, so Maltese cross poodle.
Yeah.
So he's a little tacker.
Yeah.
Well, he's only 8 months old, 9 months old, but yeah, 100%. I'd do anything. I drive. Sometimes during COVID, it was impossible to get them cut.
Yeah.
So we were driving. We would be going through referral, and we were driving an hour just to get our dog cut. You know what I mean?
Breaking the 5 kilometre radius limit. Oh, wasn't that just ridiculous?
Yeah.
But yeah, back to the whole ideas thing, and I get it as well. I get people approach me like sometimes, yes, it's been done, but I think the execution is almost as important, right? Like you can have $1 million idea, and I'm sure there's that many people that thought, let's stick a rower on the end of a reformer or a bike or whatever. But I think the execution is so important. You can sit there with your mates and think up 10 amazing businesses, but who knows how to get the investment to get it together? Who knows how to execute it? It's just, yeah.
Gary Vee talks about this all the time, hey? Like he kind of talks about the notion of being a great operator. And for so long, I didn't understand what that meant. And I was like, oh, like all right, Gary, like whatever. But I think the longer you kind of go, you're in an example is I've built this business at 10 times the rate that I built any of my other ones. You know what I mean? Like this is going a lot quicker in terms of brand building, in terms of, everything, just all the different sectors of the business are progressing and just knowing where to put things, and that's only come because, I've been in business, for like 10 years now. And, my first business took me I think for the first 2 years, I was like, it was complete disaster.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But I think over time, there's something to be said about being a great operator. I think that's something you've probably been able to prove that you can do, in terms of even just personal brand, being a great operator, being able to actually get things off the ground and execute on all, we talk about brand equity, right? Brand equity is not just words on a wall. It's not just the things you talk about in the meeting. It's actually got to be something that carries on and you can actually execute outside of that to actually get the brand equity. We can have pillars, we can do certain, we can talk about certain ideas and tone of voice and do all these things, but in reality, the execution and being a great operator is the thing that decides on whether this business is successful or not.
And it probably comes from failures as well that you become a good operator. Like you just said, your first business like did nothing right. Same like I had a yoga studio that lost money and taught me that I need to create a business model that's sustainable. You know, like you need to be able to have a crack at things. There's nothing wrong with someone just starting as well. You know, sometimes they get lucky, it goes well, but the failures are great. Like they're great. They might not be when you lose a couple $100,000 or $1 million or whatever, but you know, it's still, everything's a lesson, right?
Yeah.
And you just get better and better and better. If you're highly critical of yourself, you know, you get better. So
you just got to have the tenacity, right? I think that's the thing is like, if your first business fails, that's fine. Like, that's normal in most cases, you know, like it's, you know, and you just got to be able to kind of keep pushing forward.
Yep.
I don't know if you've read the book, what is it? Good to Great, Jim Collins, but he kind of talks about, it's a cool book, but he kind of talks about having unwavering faith in the idea and the product, because that's the thing that you need to keep on pushing forward when you go through these kind of failures or these things, you know, when certain things don't work. And I just think that's imperative if you're going, you know, just on a personal level, if you want to have any success in business. And there's different levels to it. There always is. But if you want to actually be able to get a business off the ground and allow that to create economic security for yourself and actually, you know, build something that you're extremely passionate about that, you know, might be a 5 to 10 year business, you got to be ready for just dirt for like at least 2 years, and you know, be able to kind of take, you know, criticism and things going wrong and be able to push through that.
Yeah, you got to eat shit. Is that what Gary Vee says?
Yeah.
Everyone started on Gary Vee, right? All right, Good to Great. I'll get that book. I've heard quite a few people that I respect a lot have told me to read this book. So I'll grab it after this.
Yeah, I read it. I read it maybe 4 years ago, and I just recently read it again.
Yep.
But it's Jim Collins he's a frameworks guy, which I really like. He's written Turning on the Flywheel, which is like the business model behind Amazon and these kind of things. But he's definitely great to I always kind of touch back on his stuff. The book was written, so it was a 5-year project where they went out and I think they read 10,000 essays. They interviewed over 150 founders. Like I think it was a team of 25 in pure research went into some of the companies that were able to go from good to great. And I think it was like they had to get over a multiple of 4x growth over a certain period of time. And they just went in and actually kind of dissected each of those different parts.
It's nice that it's based off research. It's not just someone going, here are my thoughts. Like that's something I don't really love about the sort of a lot of these business books. It's there's not it's opinion based, but that's fantastic.
His stuff's amazing. Like I reckon he's the premier writer in terms of business. Like he's got 3 or 4 books, and he's got essays that I just read. You know, I used to be a big reader, but not anymore. But kind of come back to his stuff. You know, just regularly, just to kind of get an understanding. Especially right now, like we're kind of, I think, trying to take the next step. So just, you know, reflecting on some of that stuff is really cool.
Nice.
All right, so the last thing that we do to finish off is quickfire questions. Now, I have to preface this because it can be quite confusing sometimes, but even though it's quickfire, you don't need to necessarily give a quick answer. Like, you just answer it how you want. If it's long, it's long. If it's quick, these are kind of really, you know, clear-cut questions that will be, you know, will create a lot of value for the listeners.
Yeah.
So
nervous.
Nah, I mean, there's nothing untoward in there.
Okay.
So, one piece of advice for your younger self.
Stay the course.
What does that mean?
Just, I think even just what we were talking about before, but just having full faith in what you're doing. I'm really lucky to have a business partner who, you know, if I doubt something, he backs me up and he goes, nah, mate, you know what you're doing, you know, back yourself. But yeah, probably just stay the course, back yourself. Because yeah, it's hard. It's a full roller coaster. And you know, there's really, sometimes there's no experts, that are doing what you're doing. So it's like, you really do need to back yourself.
Yeah, bet on yourself.
Yep.
It's the best thing you can do, I reckon.
Yep.
One piece of advice for someone thinking of getting into business.
Do your numbers, and go like crazy. So map it out and then just go really, really hard.
I heard you talk about this, and it's something that I actually thoroughly agree with, and I'm doing it myself right now. But you said when you're young and you don't have other people around you that you need to take responsibility for, to go as hard as you possibly can at gaining success.
Well, how often in your life can you actually work from 5 in the morning till, 11 o'clock at night and not be accountable for anything else? Like,
you probably got a 10-year window.
Yeah, if that. Like, depending on, depending if you want to actually get married and have kids and take on responsibilities and whatever else. But yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? That's the thing. If that aligns with your goals, why wouldn't you? Yeah,
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your opinion, what makes great marketing?
Innovation, and knowledge of the consumer. So everything I've done, I've always tried to be the coolest brand, right? And know my consumer and what they want to hear. I never want to post something or create a piece of content or whatever else that they are just either disgusted by or they think it's uncool or I don't know. But yeah, just knowing your consumer and your audience makes a really clever marketer, regardless. But marketing's made up of so many different facets anyway. But that's, I think, in terms of like brand, yeah.
You're a brand guy, right? So
yeah.
You've mentioned that a fair bit.
Yeah.
What goes into creating a successful brand then?
Exactly what I just said. Knowing your consumer, and yeah, I mean, I think once you know who you are as well, just sticking to that brand and not being too swayed by everything else that's going on, because sometimes that can be very tempting. If a competitor is doing something that you think a mass audience are really enjoying, it's hard to not want to copy. But yeah,
it's brands one of those things that it takes years to build or takes time and effort to build, but it also can be broken down with one decision. Yeah, like you can lose the brand in one bad decision.
Do you see what just happened to the Grilled founder?
I didn't.
Nah, he was caught like smoking ice or something like that.
Far out.
And it's just like one of those things that it's like out of your control, like everyone else in the company and the shareholders and everything else like that. It's sort of just like one of those things that it's a really scary thought that something can bring down a brand as strong as Grilled. My mate messaged me, he had shares, he's like, I've just taken a big hit, and yeah. Really, really interesting stuff. And I guess that's a risk of anything, like growing a big business, and sometimes, the people that you're involved with can really be influential.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of one of the core pillars of investing is do your research on the operator, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to understand who's at the helm of a company when you're going to invest in it. It's the same in business, like if you're going to get into business with someone, if you're going to hire someone, pay attention to the operator, do your research on it. Don't just take people's word. And that sounds really horrible to say, but we live in a world, and I think this is what social media has created. It's almost the negative side of it over maybe the last 10 years is that it's a power grab, right? And some people will do whatever they can to get ahead, and sometimes that can mean, and sometimes shit goes wrong. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he was going through a tough time. Who fucking knows, right?
Yeah.
But it's like this. I think the lesson out of that is it is absolutely critical that if you are going to get into business, that you understand the responsibilities that come with it and the impact you can have on everybody in the business as well.
That's the key message, I think. particularly if it's your livelihood at stake as well. But yeah, there's a huge responsibility. Even just starting an ABN and starting a business, there are liabilities people don't even understand that they can go to jail for. It's really important to do your research, right? But yeah.
I didn't pay my taxes for a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I was a sole trader.
Yeah.
And that was painful for the next 2 years after that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So
It's a common mistake, mate. Yeah.
definitely. I didn't even, I think because I was a PT early on in my days too, worked at a Good Life. And I just didn't even realize I had a business,
Yep.
my first year. And then, I was living out of home. So I wasn't, I was young. I was living out of home, hadn't been taught any of this stuff. Just go, I know I want to be a PT. And then all of a sudden had to, I went and seen an accountant for the first time, and he's like, oh, we're going to have to do some fixing up here.
Got to find X amount of dollars.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Awesome, brother. I want to say a massive thank you to you for coming on the show. I know you're a busy man at the moment, so I really appreciate it. Where can everyone find everything about you, everything about Strong? Give it a plug.
Yeah, so just jump on the Strong Instagram. It's literally @Strong. It's the best handle ever.
Geez, you would have had to do a bit to get that.
Yeah, I just started. I remember everyone was buying up domains like, koala.com, got theirs and it was as investments. And I just started buying one-word Instagram names. So it only cost me like $3.5 US, would have been 6 years ago, I reckon.
Yeah.
But now it's worth. So I get offers every day. But yeah, I was literally just buying up one-word Instagram names as investments.
Amazing.
Yeah. So @Strong, and then mine's @RamsLegit, my Instagram. But yeah.
Awesome. And the studios are going up everywhere around Australia at the moment?
Yeah. Literally everywhere at the moment. Brisbane, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Sydney. Our first in Sydney will launch in a couple of months. We've got a couple in Tassie launching. Auckland is about 2 months off. Everywhere but Perth, because everyone who's in Perth can't actually come to this side of the country. So
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. But there'll be a Strong pretty much near everyone soon, hopefully.
Amazing. Definitely check it out, guys. Amazing concept. They're amazing studios. The product itself is really cool as well, so definitely go check it out. To everyone who listened today, really appreciate you guys as well, the support you've given us over the last, since we started, but even more so now, it's just been amazing. So a big shout out to you guys. And John, thanks for putting this together, brother. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week.